My name is Christopher Ward. I have a bachelor's degree in biomedical sciences with a focus on public health. My master's degree is in critical incident management with a focus on public policy. I've turned that into a career in medical research where I've been on the forefront for drugs like Humira, Boniva, Parkinson's drugs, and I've also worked in melanoma, bringing autoimmune therapies to market. So that's my background. Every decision that I've had to make since out of college to now has been based on evidence. So I know that I'll be able to take that to the Capitol to make sure that a decision is not based on emotion, but on evidence. And that's something that we're sorely needing right now. I am a person who is self-funded because I don't feel like I need to owe anybody any favors. Okay? So as you'll see my report, 99% of it has been paid by me, and we're not sparing any expense. So we believe, as a middle-class individual, we can speak up, we have a voice, we have a message, and we have a method to get it out. And I need your help to make sure that that message of conservative values gets to the Capitol.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Story, and for about 20 years I've been a national nonprofit executive, leading a nonprofit that I grew from here in Austin to college campuses across America. And in the process of doing that, we've shaped an entire industry in our country and how they relate to college campuses. In that industry, I'm probably one of the most respected leaders in that industry and have led on the national level, the regional level, the local level, directly related to probably over 100, influenced probably over 100,000 plus students, 10,000 plus leaders, staff and faculty and others of different colleges and universities. Started several national events that advance our principles as an organization. So all the things that are required to do all those things, I understand. That budgets, people skills, human resource management, networking, movement, building coalitions, all of those things are things that I have done. Standing up against folks when you need to, working with them when you need to as well. But knowing the difference as opposed to the times it's important to stand up and when it's important to work with someone. It's very important. We build coalitions on campuses coast to coast. I also serve on a variety of national boards. I won't list all of them, but a couple of them are the National Day of Prayer. I've served on that board for 11 years. And I've transitioned them through 3 of their executives. They're all amazing national level executives. From Shirley Dobson to Mrs. Ann Graham Lotz to now Ronnie Floyd, who formerly led the Southern Baptist Convention. He'll kill me for that one. And so also I served on the National Prayer Committee, serving there, and a variety of other boards across our country. I've started a variety of large organizations as well. I have 7 kids, 1 wife, and someplace in our country you have to answer that question. But I have 7 kids, 1 wife, and 6 boys, 1 girl. And I'm passionate as a candidate for conservative values and seeing what we need to stand up for and fight for those things in the House. I'm sure we'll detail some of those things later. But I think basically it comes down to not voting just to personally advance your career in some sort of political career, which is what I'm not in this for. I don't need this. I'm doing it because I felt somebody needed to stand up to change things in our district, and that's exactly what I've done. I'm the first person that ran against Larry Gonzalez. He retired a month and a half later, and I did it when it wasn't popular. And so on and so on. I'll answer further questions as to why I am that type of candidate. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that. First question. Each of you, starting with Jeremy, tell us what your evaluation of the job Larry Gonzalez did in this position.
You read my mind before. Do you want to stand in your strong?
I don't care. It's up to you.
What would you guys like?
Whatever you feel comfortable.
Either one's fine. I'll stand up. So I can see everybody is there. So, all right. So I'll answer this question. So I evaluated Larry Gonzalez and felt that he was saying one thing and doing another. And that often he was going along to get along, and it was causing that kind of behavior. He'd aligned himself with Speaker Strauss. And I spoke out against Larry and ran against Larry. So I didn't just speak. I did. And I did when it wasn't the popular thing to do. and as a result, later he retired about a month and a half later. It was not an easy decision, but I did it because I am a bold and consistent conservative. And I stand for what I believe in. And I saw, as I evaluated his voting record, that it was not matching what he was saying. We can talk about specific issues. I don't think we have enough time on this question, but I will definitely address that. And I also work to help get our current state chairman elected, because that's part of the whole process, and that state chairman is pushed to help have leadership change in the House. As a result of doing those two things, what I have been rewarded with is our own SREC reps and other people standing against me for standing for conservative values. But I will still stand for what I believe in, and the proof is in the pudding. Larry Gonzalez is retired, Speaker Strauss is retired, his lieutenants have retired, and those who have pushed with me across this state for those things to happen, happened. And we were right, because that wasn't in our interest as conservatives across this nation. State, rather, or nation. State.
Thank you. Jeremy and I are going to agree on a lot of things today. So if you were hoping for fireworks, unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen. Okay. Same reason. June 12th, I actually announced that I would run against Larry Gonzalez. It got no traction because nobody knew who the heck I was. Okay. But nobody knows who the taxpayer is. Everybody forgets that once they get to the Capitol. So I had a recent question asked that, what have you done for the party lately? Well, as a taxpayer, I'm an ambassador for the Republican Party. I work 60 hours a week to pay my increasing property taxes. Guess what? I was mad at Larry Gonzalez. So I jumped into this race as an angry taxpayer. And then you continue to go on and you find out, well, what's driving my property taxes up? Is it school finance reform? What are these things that, you go into, you look at pro-life issues, dismemberment amendments that should have been entered that got tabled. Things of that nature, is like, those aren't conservative values. So at that point, my wife and I conferred. We jumped into the race. Again, nobody knew who the heck I was, but now they do. Thank you.
Well, this will help separate you. Why did you believe that you are the best candidate for this position?
Do we alternate?
Yes, we do.
First.
Oh, okay. Again, I'm going to go back to my opening statement, is that I've worked in a field that is evidence-based. Okay, so if you present a fact, you can't argue with facts. The Democrats would like to do that. Many of our rhinos would like to do that. But at the end of the day, you remove emotion, you present the fact, and you judge, or you pass legislation. It's simple as that. And I don't owe anybody anything. I have not rubbed elbows, shaking hands, or making deals, or been groomed for this position for over a period of years. Sorry, I'm not pointing at you, pointing at the duck. To fill this void. Okay? So there may be this huge chasm within the Republican Party, but I plan to be the bridge that brings it back together.
Mr. Stork.
Yeah, I think Chris is right. We don't really have a whole lot of animosity between each other. I would say, so I like Chris as an individual. I just would say that I feel like I'm the best candidate because I have the most proven experience to do what I'm talking about. I have that on a national level, a local level, a regional level. I have that both in politics and out of politics, both in my nonprofit service and elsewhere. I've stood against people that are a lot bigger than Joe Strauss, which is why I wasn't afraid to stand against him whenever he was in power. Same thing with Larry. Look, those guys reigned for 8 to 11 years, anyway, whether you're talking about Larry or Joe. They ended this session, right? And I know what you need to do to work with people to take those kinds of folks out that are not supporting our conservative values. And so I guess what I would say the main reason is, number one, my experience far exceeds all of the other candidates in the race. Also, my willingness to stand up has been proven. Proven when I stood up and said we should elect James Dickey instead of who our SREC reps were saying to elect. I was the chaplain of the state party of Texas. Do you know why I'm no longer the chaplain? Because when I did that, our own SREC reps fought and caused such chaos at the state level that I decided, along with James, that it wasn't worthwhile for me to serve, and I stepped down. It was our own SREC reps. And the reason why is because I opposed their viewpoint that the other candidate should have won. However, James Dickey has been the person that has brought the House in alignment. So there'll be one example where I've stood up. Property taxes. Whenever our school board was considering a bond in the round run, I said, look, bonds are not necessarily a bad thing, but this one is. It's going to double our indebtedness in one time. And I even told the school board members, Mason, Moses, and others, you can look on Facebook and see visual arguments between us. They're visual on Facebook. And where I'm saying, if you do this, it's not going to pass. And what's going to happen is people are going to come back after you. You better evaluate this more than what they're just telling you. And that's exactly what happened. And so I could go through issue after issue after issue and show you where I've stood and where I've been right and where I've done it when it wasn't popular.
John,
Go ahead and speak.
the way this is, I do 2 minutes, it makes all that racket.
Yeah, that's when it should be noticed that that's the end of the 2 minutes.
Okay, does it beep or something? I can shut it off, does it beep? So it beeps?
I think it beeps at the end of the 2 minutes.
So we're going to listen for that.
When you listen to that, hear that sound you've got, just, that comes in at 5 seconds.
I thought it was someone's phone ringing.
I know.
I didn't know it was time to read.
That's why I was off.
Give him more time.
No, I'm good.
What conservative Republican goals are you most passionate about?
I'm most passionate about reducing property tax by overhauling the property tax system. I hope we'll get an opportunity to explain why later. In 2 minutes, it's hard to do that on each issue. I'm also very passionate about religious liberty issues in our state house. I'm also passionate about fiscal conservatism, reducing our spending and changing the way that we finance schools. Because I believe that the school refinancing and how we rework the school financing needs to go hand in hand with our property taxes. I think we need to deal with that in the same session. If we deal with those two things, which we haven't dealt with and are literally falling apart in a lot of ways, in the same session, I think it will take care of a lot of other things further down the road. I'm also passionate for reducing toll roads across our state and making it so that toll roads become freeways once they're profitable. And have a whole series of ways we can do each of these things. I'd love to discuss them in detail when we have more time. I haven't heard the buzzer, so I'm okay. So those are issues that I'm very, very passionate about. I think also legislative ethics reform is a big deal, because what I've learned is that it underlies everything else. When the system is broken, you get the same results. So you have to change the system. So I'm for issuing a moratorium so you can't leave the legislature and immediately become a lobbyist. I think there should at least be a 2-year moratorium. Secondly, I'm for term limits. I think the term limits would be a wonderful idea. Thirdly, I'm for when you get an in-kind donation from a lobbyist that is like a dinner or a fishing trip, if that happens for somebody, they should have to report that at a much lower level than they do right now so that we can see who's really influencing our legislators. For me, I pledged that I'm not going to do any of that. I got a whole life to live, and they can come to my office and they can meet with me, but I'm not going on any trips. I'm not going to any bars. I'm not going to anything like that. I will be open for them for business in my office. And that's my pledge. But in terms of law, I think you should have to report that when you do it. And right now you don't until it gets to such a high level. So those are the couple of legislative ethics reforms as well that I think is important.
Mr. Ward.
All right. So, agreed. School finance reform and property taxes, that's going to be the #1 driver for the people in my neighborhood. Jeremy lives in my neighborhood, and so he agrees with that. But on top of that, we need to make sure that there's a focus on legislation that does not inhibit our ability to grow. So there's often times where legislation is presented that will end up stifling the free market. Okay, I'm a huge advocate for a free market system. It is a system that controls a lot of social issues. A business doesn't like the way you are, well, guess what? You don't go to that business, they will lose your money. Okay, so the free market really cures a lot of ails. So I would protect Texas against legislation that would inhibit the free market. On top of that, the Texas Tribune, whatever you think about them, they have presented a large case about mother mortality recently. They've been harping on it for a little while, and as a researcher, you have to dig deeper into these numbers. Okay, so being pro-life, I think we should also not just protect the life of the infant, but we also need to look into this a little deeper about the life of the mother after the child is born. This does not mean that we need to increase funding to figure this out. This just means we need a researcher's eye on this to say, okay, well, this is poor reporting, this is poor mother health. Is it related to education? Is it related to ethnicity? Is it related to just pure accidents? So these are those things that we need to do to take that one step, step from being do not resuscitate, the abortion bills, and then also the mother maternity mortality rate. So two big things in our family that we talk about a lot.
Okay, stay standing.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Would you support a bill that would phase out the state inventory tax, and why?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about that, so I will have to do.
Quick answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Story?
I think you can't consider that bill in isolation, is what I would say. Because we really have to reform our property taxes. In fact, really that reflects looking at other taxes as well. Because you can't just say, oh, we're going to lower property taxes. You can do some things that will lower them, like, say, making our ballots more transparent so that voters have to see exactly the debt load they're voting on, or allowing voters to vote if it increases beyond a certain percentage. I would say 4% at least on that one. Those sorts of things, but you can't just do that alone to drastically change our property tax situation. We're 6th largest in the nation right now. It's crazy. So you got to evaluate other taxes. Inventory tax is one of them. Gas tax is one of them. There's a variety of things. Sales tax. I favor more of a sales tax increase, a slide that, to drastically reduce property taxes, because property taxes are more insidious because they're taxing you on that which you own, which is what inventory tax is a tax on what you own. In fact, you're getting doubly taxed, because you're being taxed when you buy it oftentimes, depending on what purpose you use for it, but then also you're getting taxed again on your inventory. As a person who one time ran a small business that it grew to about $500,000 a year, I was running it on the side while I was doing campus renewal. We actually sold all kinds of jewelry. We had to literally count every last little piece of jewelry because it was valuable, right? And then they tax you on it. So I think that if we can find ways to relieve business taxes, that's good. So I would lean in that direction. But I want to make sure that we look at it as a whole so that we're reducing things like property taxes, which I think is the most important tax to reduce. And then we look at some of the business taxes. But that one is a particularly insidious one, which you're getting double taxed. So I favor more the consumption and transaction type taxes than those kinds of taxes.
Stay standing, but have you read Governor Abbott's property tax proposal that he really went into detail just a few days ago?
Right.
And would you sign on as a sponsor of that bill?
Well, there is no bill right now.
Right.
That would be one thing to point out. So it's hard to know what you're going to sign on to. So I'd be really careful and say, who knows on that. But in terms of have I read it, yes. Do I agree with much of it? Yes. In fact, what I just said to you guys is much that's in it. The 4% rule is in it. The transparency rule, telling when you vote on a bond or whatever, knowing exactly how much total debt a district has and other common metrics that would have to be consistent across all bond elections. That's it. One thing that's a little concerning to me is the unfunded mandate rule. That one's a little concerning to me, just to be honest, because that can be used for conservative values, but can also be used against it, if y'all know what I'm talking about. And so, because that would inhibit the state from being able to say almost anything to the local environment sometimes, because they could say, well, it's an unfunded mandate. I think that goes against the Texas Constitution, to be honest. And so I think we have to be careful on that one in particular. But a lot of the property tax reform that he proposes, man, I'm for it. In fact, what's interesting is what he's proposing right now is far more strenuous than what didn't pass in the last session, right? I'm not against that. I'm just pointing that out. And now you get all these legislators all of a sudden lining up behind it. Let me tell you why. It's because Strauss is gone. And because guys like Larry are gone. And other people that were backing him. And I think we have to keep up the pressure so that we can see that happen. But it's just an interesting dynamic. It even illustrates, once again, the same problem. So yes, I would support much of what's in it. I can't tell you that I would support all of it because it's not a bill yet. And in particular, I'm concerned about the unfunded mandate section. Yes, I get that we don't need to just pass down randomly things to the city that just totally squashes local control, because we do not need it. We need absolute local control. I agree with that. But to me, local control is ultimately the voter, not necessarily the city council. And so I think we need to be careful when we talk about that unfunded mandate rule, to discuss that a little more and be a little more nuanced about that.
Mr. Ward.
Yes. Again, we're going to agree on it. Yes. The answer is yes. And it is more strenuous than what was proposed last year. So I would support most of the measures that are in it, again. But I want to warn us. We've heard it a couple of times that say Joe Strauss is gone, Larry Gonzalez is gone, Byron Cook is gone. They're not gone. Their money's still here. Okay, so let's not rest on our laurels and think that this is just going to be passed because it's presented and they're no longer in the House. Their money is still here. The Democrats are still here. So moving forward, yes, I think that that's a great start. I think Abbott's taken from the Trump campaign, the Trump mentality a little bit. This is the art of the deal, right? So we're going to start here, we'll end here. I think it's a good start. I would like to see it go forward. Yes, I think we all would appreciate a little more money in our pocket. So,
Stay standing.
Oh yeah. My wife's Catholic. I stand up and down a lot, so I'm used to it.
There were a number of questions that all related. What efforts would you expend on the behalf of the 65 and older on property taxes, text tag, all these things that have been proposed but never acted on?
Yeah, so a lot of the individuals who are 65 or over are on a fixed income. So anything that we can do to help ease that burden, whether it's that, whether it's the second largest amount of money we spend in the state is actually in healthcare, right? And so out of all the money that we spend, 58% of it, I believe, is spent on people who are 60 and over. So in that, we need to look at that to make sure that that is viable. We need to make sure that your cost of daily living is viable. I would be happy to look at things that are proposed to make sure that if it's a text tag rebate or tolls are free or whatever it is, I would be happy to look at that and vote on anything that could make life a little easier. So.
Mr. Story.
The number one thing that's going to make life easier for 65 and over people in this state is reducing property taxes. Flat out. That's the most important thing. Because basically what it puts you guys, anyone who's over that state, in a place you can own your own home, you could have worked your whole life for it, but you're renting your house from the government. So we must do the hard thing of overhauling property taxes. We don't need to do it piecemeal. We don't need to say, well, these people get exemptions and these don't. We need to overhaul the whole complete system. And so that's what I would say. And you will see the best quality of life increase in terms of your taxes if we can do that. We have to have the fortitude to do it. If I'm in the House, I will not shrink back from that. I will push for it, I will bring other people together, and when those who don't join that, I will speak out. And I will speak out clearly, and I will speak out in ways that everyone will know, just like I've done with Stroud, just like I've done with Gonzalez, just like I did with our state chairman. And I will continue that. Because we must reduce property taxes. I think that would be one of the biggest things we can do for that age group. There's some other things that we need to consider as well, but I think that's, by and large, number one is we have to reduce property taxes. If you just look at dollars you spend and where you're affected by the government, it is in those areas. Things like property, things like toll roads, okay, text tags. Here's what I'd say. Don't focus on the 65 crowd. Focus on everyone. Seriously, that's what I would say as a conservative. Let's focus on that. Let's get rid of the toll roads. Let's sunset them so that once they become profitable in the arrangements we have with them, they no longer are toll roads. They're freeways. And not only does it benefit all 65-year-olds, but it also benefits the 35-year-olds, right? Or how about this? Cities should not be able to have non-compete agreements with toll roads. Do you know that they can do that in Texas? That cities can actually say, we won't build roads so that you have to use the toll road? So I would say, let's fix that. That will help everyone, including 65-year-olds and over. So what I would say is, those sorts of things I would fight for everyone. But I think those key issues like that would rise everyone higher. So, yeah. But if you want to talk about more specific issues than that, I'm willing to.
Say it. You get the next question.
Okay.
Okay, this is an interesting one, and I thought about it. What do you feel about your own media campaign? Is it sufficient? Is it well done, or should there be some things that you're going to change? Because some of our discussions in previous weeks initiated that question. We haven't seen signs. So what we'd like to know is, what is your campaign procedures from here on out?
Sure.
47 days, right?
We need more signs out.
46 days, right?
Well, Chris and I have actually had a little dialogue about that.
Don't steal my thunder, all right? Don't steal my thunder.
On the sign. Privately we did. Because what you have is a small group in this county that is trying to control the election by misinformation and just outright control and intimidation. They've even claimed things about me that aren't true. Even our own SRC rep has done that, one of them. Both of them, actually. And so one of the ways is that they are making it hard for Chris and I to get signs out, right? In different ways. And so that is difficult. But however, in terms of my media campaign, I can tell you that tonight I'm putting out even more signs. I got plenty of signs in my cars and in my house, both 4x8s and the yard signs, and those yard signs are going out in the next couple of days to all the people that have already said. What I've been doing is, I don't want to give away strategy here, because that's what happens, is then they head you off, right? Neither does Chris probably. But I would just say, I've got a lot of people that have decided to put campaign signs in their yard. And those people are going to be getting campaign signs in their yard in the next very near time frame. And so, let's say days, okay? And in terms of the 4x8s, we've already put up a bunch, and we're putting up a whole bunch more moving westward, to do that. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to continue to increase as much as we can, but we're also balancing on-the-ground behaviors, right? Because that's where you really win or lose elections, is talking to people. Right? Signs provide an air support, but you need the ground support. No amount of air support, I think, will win an election like this. You need the ground support. So I've been focusing more of my attention and my media on very intentional ways on the local, like talking to people, face-to-face, house-to-house type stuff. But those signs are coming out. Because every time I talk to them, I say, hey, would you like a yard sign? And they say yes. And so I already know who they are, and we're putting them in their yard. So Cynthia, if you hear that, I guess you can try to head me off, but that is what we're headed to do.
Just for work.
Yeah, so an interesting story. Jeremy and I actually talked about this, is I had 20 signs up, 4x8s. I have one up. So through whatever gamesmanship, misinformation, or me making assumptions based on information I received, I took 19 down. I'll take that back. I have one up that remains. I have, out of the other 19, I took 15 down because 3 were taken down for me, and 1 I have to go get because my neighbor said it's behind the cedars, and my T-posts are gone. So, you tell me, am I running a good campaign? Somebody seems scared. So, and Jeremy and I talked about this, and thank you for not stealing my thunder, is that I told Jeremy about this. I said, hey, you've got some signs in a spot where I was told I need to take mine down. And his are still there. So, who are they scared of? Okay? He's going to take votes from me. And God bless you. Okay? Because we are talking to the same crowd. Alright? But at the end of the day, his signs are up where mine are not. Because I was pleasantly or not pleasantly asked to remove them. Okay? So, as far as social media goes, we're rocking. Okay? So we make sure that we're in 7,000 faces every day. Okay? So we pay for that. We make sure that a message is out there of conservative values. And we just released a press release. I put it to all the newspapers. No one's run it yet. But I put it out on my website and my Facebook page, is that based on the temperature in the Capitol, we feel, in my family, that DC and Hollywood has nestled their way into Austin, and we're seeing an attack on women there. And not to pull from a Democratic talking point, but there is, okay? Texas deserves to be chivalrous and respect. So my family is going to donate my legislative salary to 4 nonprofits within the Williamson County area that focus on rebuilding women and families who have been suffering from sexual assault. We're also going to do one that mentors leaders to prevent it, and then Texas State Rifle Association to give you the opportunity to protect yourself.
Okay.
I'm lost when I'm up or down.
That's all right. One of the key questions that came in late, let's see, where is it? That was really good. What are your 3 most challenging and what are your 3 most satisfying things that you've ever undertaken in your career?
Sure. Real quick on the signs, I want to say, I'm not implying that anyone is taking down my signs. I'm just implying that because they're trying to lock down insider votes that control a lot of the land, it's hard to find land where you can legally put it on.
We have a number of previous candidates in this group.
On the other hand, so I just want to make sure I'm not saying that. I am also saying there are reasons why they haven't taken down my signs. And it's because I understand how air support works, and I know how to make that happen in such a way that I'm not compromising what I'm doing, and also the fact that I am a little more high profile than Chris, in terms of I was the state chaplain, I did stand up against Strauss, and there are things that I think that people know they can't quite get away with me. And so that's part of the reason. And also just relationships that I've built that maybe they are opposing me, but they're not going to come at me full force. Because there's a respect even though they disagree.
Okay, 1 minute rebuttals.
So that being said, what is most important? One of the things that
most satisfying and most disappointing events in your career?
Yeah. So wow. Most satisfied in the sense that I've literally shifted an entire industry in our country, which is how we work with college students and engage them on a spiritual level. I've united together every single Christ-centered sort of ministry and church in terms of the major denominations and ministries and nonprofits in our country, and brought them to a point where they were working together better than they ever had before. When I first started, they were fighting, and today they're all working together all the way up to the national level in a place that has increased their capacity to reach more and more students in ways that no one else has in the nation. I'm very proud of that. I've also founded the Collegiate Day of Prayer, which adopted half of the countries in our campus in prayer by churches across America. That had never been done before in the history of our country. It's the largest prayer event in the history of our country for college students.
Most disappointed and most satisfied?
Most disappointed. Man. I mean, I've had frustrations, but I wouldn't call them disappointments.
Let's go with frustration.
Disappointments. I'm having a hard time on that one. I mean, disappointments for me have been stuff like where you sort of expect one person to be one way and they're not. And when you're dealing with a lot of different types of leaders, and they have a public persona and they have a private persona, and when you deal with them and they're very different behind the scenes, that's, I think, some of the most disappointing moments I've had. Just because I deal with leaders all the time, and when somebody sideswipes you and you're not expecting it, those sorts of things. And I'm not just referencing candidates or anything, I'm talking about just 20 years of working with all kinds of leaders. Those have been probably the toughest moments for me, because when you're trying to bring leaders together, you often take on some of the pain that they have for not working together, because you get blamed for things when you're in the middle of their conflict, right? That kind of disappointment and pain is stuff that I've faced my whole life, but I've just pressed forward, because I know over time, if I press into that kind of conflict to bring resolution and forward movement, that even though I take it on the head for maybe as much as several years, in the end it works out. So that's what I would say.
Okay. As far as the three,
Most disappointing and most satisfying.
three most satisfying, sorry. As far as that goes, I've built a career in medical research. Okay, so the number one is bringing drugs or pharmaceuticals to a patient who is in need. Many times that is for an underserved population. Pharmaceuticals, good or bad, they actually do research for patients who are a very small group. Cost money, but we bring that to market. Leaving that, I left that industry to then work for protecting patients' rights. So in that, I've advanced the practice of informed consent, HIPAAs, following HIPAA rules, things of that nature. So in that, I've worked to help protect the patients. Okay, and then now moving forward, we're protecting you in general to make sure that pharmaceutical companies aren't running wild. They're reporting what they need to do to make sure that you make an educated decision when you go to that physician. Okay, because the biggest thing is, we had the Sunshine Law passed not too long ago, which required physicians to report what they are prescribing or any kind of financial benefit that they receive from a pharmaceutical company as a form of transparency. Also something that needs to happen in the Capitol. But I digress. As far as my frustrations go, or disappointments, I was a young man, and I decided that I was going to play sports and not join the military. Guess what? 6'1", can't jump, but I can shoot. Was not going to be the best NBA basketball player out there. Okay, so that was one of the frustrations or disappointments that I had. But now I am glad to help serve those veterans who have come back, who are looking to assimilate back into the environment. I work with a nonprofit called Veterans Collective that helps with patients, soldiers with PTSD. And the final one, I didn't become a physician.
Good.
Oh yeah.
I love this one. How do you think the Texas Speaker of the House should be elected?
Yeah.
And how important is it that the Speaker and all reps that are Republican sign a support of the Republican Party platform? And then the second part of that is, and the moral values of the Privacy Act and right to life. How would you handle yourself in the House and on those principles?
Right. So I think the Republican Party should choose who the Speaker is. I've signed on that pledge, so that's out there. As far as protecting life, with my life, okay? So I pledge that anything that has to do with any right to life, any moral or ethical decision making on an unborn child that cannot protect itself, I'm going to be there for that.
What about the Republican Party platform in its entirety?
Okay. Like, do I support the Republican Party platform in its entirety? Absolutely. So something we've been saying a lot is just because, the Republican Party planks are deteriorating, right? We're just having a hard time electing people who choose to stand on them. Does that make sense? So, they set out in 2014 a great platform, and I believe every bit of it. But if we're not going to choose to elect people who want to stand on that, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Okay.
And so I will stand on that platform.
Do you want me to repeat that question?
It's a big question, because you asked about our platform, you asked about privacy bill and abortion, and what?
Well, not necessarily abortion, but the Speaker of the House, how should he be elected?
So you want me to address the privacy bill and the speaker's
And the
election?
privacy bill and the right to elect.
So, I believe we should elect the speaker in the Republican caucus. I've been advocating for that before it became cool lately. I was advocating for it when people were speaking against me for doing so. In fact, at our own EC, you guys, if you were there, heard Larry stand up and give this impassioned plea for why we should support Strauss. And what you saw was me try to stand up and speak against that, and what you also saw was other members of our EC say, well, Jeremy can't speak anymore. Now, never mind that I had been allowed to speak in our EC many times prior. At that point, I was squelched. Getting back to the point that if you are trying to control the words in this election, I was willing to speak out about it then, I was just squelched. I have spoken out about it publicly, which is why Strauss put this election as one of his sort of 11 or 12 watched elections with his large campaign chest. Because I believe that Speaker Strauss was not good for us. The reason was because he was allowing the Democrats to vote for him so he would stay elected. We need to obliterate that by doing this in the Republican caucus, so the Republicans control who is the Speaker or whoever the majority is. Now, you don't officially elect him in the caucus because that would be wrong. But what you do is you come to consensus in the caucus, get everyone to pledge to stay to that consensus, take it to the floor where you dutifully elect the Speaker by law. So I'm not necessarily saying we change Texas law. Also know that it's possible we won't get a conservative speaker, but I sure would fight for it if I were there to make sure that we do. In that room, privately, there would be no capitulation on my part, because this is our opportunity to make sure that the Texas House passes conservative legislation instead of sort of sliding it to the last 2 days of the session. Beyond that, I have shown a proven record of doing it. I went all the way up to making sure that we elected the right state chairman. I worked to make sure that he got that one extra vote, that he is now the state chairman. He's the reason, he and others, in changing the party culture across our state, and particularly in the state level, to push for that platform. Thirdly, the platform has like 100 plus planks in it. Not everything is perfect in that platform, okay? And James will tell you that, who's our state chairman, is so as well as I. However, there are priorities that people said, look, we got about 5 or 6 priorities that we need to focus on, like property tax reform and all those sorts of things. I think we should make legislators sign that. Now, whether they agree with whether you should limit cow milk is another matter. Privacy bill, because right now it's a lot of things. I hope we can address the privacy bill in a separate issue later. But privacy bill, I would vote for it. I would have stood up for it. I would have sponsored it. I would have written it if no one else had written it. Because it was common sense legislation that did not regulate businesses whatsoever. In fact, it allowed for those businesses to have greater liberty and ensure the liberty to choose to actually do whatever they wanted with their bathrooms. All it did was say that those businesses can't tell our state what to do with our bathrooms in our schools and in our state buildings. And to me, it was a very reasonable measure to protect women across our state so that they wouldn't have to worry about sexual assault while they're going to the bathroom. And I can tell you case after case where that actually did happen in the last year.
Do you want to have any additional information?
No, I didn't mention the privacy bill.
Okay.
So, so I do support legislation that would allow a business to choose. So this goes back to the free market. Okay? So if Target decides that, hey, they want to have open and free bathrooms, well, guess what? I have the ability to take my money somewhere else. Okay? So conservative values gives the business the right to choose what they want to enforce, not the state. So once the state decides to tell the business what to do, then we are no longer in conservative value territory. Okay? Now as far as for schools, different story, I would definitely look at some of that. So locker rooms and things of that nature.
Mr. Story, you get the next question. Start off, give us your evaluation of and whether or not you would participate and why or why not with the Freedom Caucus.
Absolutely, I participate with the Freedom Caucus. I think the Freedom Caucus has a lot of great ideas. I think that they are responsible for many of the, quote, conservative reforms that happened in this session. That wouldn't be the only caucus I participate with, but it would be one of them, because I think that they were for property tax reduction, which I'm for. I think they were for religious freedom measures, which I'm for. I think they were for conservative values like pro-life measures. The dismemberment abortion ban that we're all talking about, that would not be here if it were not for the Freedom Caucus. And members who are associated, were not even officially part of it, but were working with them. Because those measures had been pulled out of the pro-life bills in committee. And what the Freedom Caucus and others like them, it wasn't just them, but others like them, were trying to do was reinsert teeth back into these pro-life bills and other bills once they hit the floor. Why were they having to do that? Because it was getting jammed in committee. So we wouldn't have some of these reforms that we're now being touted as conservative if there hadn't been people pushing from the floor to put teeth back in. Let me give you another one. Immigration bill. The immigration bill that said that when an officer stops someone, they can actually check if they're a legal immigrant or not. And that wouldn't have happened because when it got to the floor, it didn't have any teeth. And it was people like the Freedom Caucus that put that teeth back in the bill like it was originally supposed to be, that allowed us to have some of these, quote, conservative reforms that everyone's now touting, but it was really a select few that pushed for them. So I believe we must push for them. That doesn't mean we have to make enemies just to make enemies. I understand the difference. You're talking to somebody who's built coalitions by the thousands across America. But it does mean that we have to stand for what we believe in, and sometimes that means we do have to push. And we have to say, look, we're not going to capitulate any longer. We must press forward, and I like that about the Freedom Caucus. They're the reason we had a special session. We wouldn't have had the opportunity to sort of revisit that. They're not the reason, actually. They're the reaction. The reason is that Strauss pushed everything to the last day and then tried to make a gamble and make everybody vote on it or have a special session. And I wish I could get into further because our own legislator was very much involved in that with the Texas Medical Agency. I don't have time to talk about it all if you want to ask me a question about it later. And so I will say that the fact that the Freedom Caucus was there, we are better off for it as conservatives than if they had not been there. But it's not just them. There are other people that are also conservative in the same way, pushing with them.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I support the Freedom Caucus. They were one that I followed quite a bit when I was leading up to deciding whether to run. I think at the end of the regular session, what kind of ticked me off a little bit, though, as a taxpayer, is I saw the kangaroo court type legislation that happened on the last day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, we can be aggressive and we can promote conservative values, but we can't lose our cool. Okay? So as a candidate and then eventual representative, I want to make sure that even the Freedom Caucus and those who like or dislike them can understand that there's a certain decorum that needs to happen when we're going through this. Okay? So, but yes, I support the Freedom Caucus and what the conservative values that they were striving to push.
Okay.
It's late day.
What is your understanding of Agenda 21?
Glenn Beck's version?
No, our version.
So the only Agenda 21 I know about is the UN version.
Correct.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Agenda 2030.
Yeah. So I believe in Texas sovereignty. I believe in the United States sovereignty. So I will protect it however I can. Okay. I mean, that's pretty simple.
Sure. I mean, something like that is a whole series of laws that are being promoted in different ways that have the general idea to remove sovereignty from a local place and move it to more of a global place. Because it's a variety of things. One example of that I think is very pertinent to this election will be our own Representative Larry Gonzalez, who, in the midst of his TMA review of sunset legislation, tried not only put a bill on the floor, but then also put it in the legislation to make sure it happened, to try to have a board that would have licensed doctors beyond Texas and had people outside of Texas that were not elected be able to deal with the regulation of doctors. And what that would have done is potentially overridden a lot of our pro-life legislation because people that are not even in our legislature would have been able to do it. That's that same genre, same idea. I would have stood against that. Our own legislator stood for that. Other examples, I've been to the UN. I mean, I've been there. It is a nasty place in a lot of ways. And so I would stand against things that remove our local sovereignty, right? But it's not just a big thing. There's specific things. I'll tell you a thing I did that just last year when Trump was running, and he was the only candidate, right, for the Republican Party. Originally I supported Cruz, and then President Trump, when I became a delegate to our national convention, and then President Trump even asked me to serve on a spiritual advisory council, which I did.
What is your position on making English the official language, and what is your impression, as part of that, what is your belief that all immigrants should be treated as constitutional citizens, which is one of Larry's biggest points?
All immigrants should be treated as constitutional citizens.
In other words, they should have all the rights of the Constitution grants citizens for aliens.
Right. So, okay. Number one, I think English should be the predominant language in our nation. I don't have a problem with people speaking other languages, though, right? I'm very much for it because I've been a life of bringing people together across racial boundaries. I grew up in a Hispanic inner city, Houston. I was the minority. I was the white guy and surrounded by Hispanics. My best friend was Hispanic. I am semi-fluent in Spanish, but not really that great. But yes, I think you're going to have a common language. And so I'm all for English being the predominant language. I think that's part of the confusion we see in schools sometimes, is you've got trying to accommodate so many different languages instead of trying to get people who immigrate to our country to accommodate common standards. But you can do that without necessarily pushing down people's own cultures. I think we just say, look, this is what we're about. Now, in terms of immigrants and getting all the benefits, if they're legal immigrants who have gone through all the processes, as were many of the people in the neighborhood I grew up in, as was my best friend's parents, who were first generation, but legal, came in, faced all the difficulties you face to do that. If they're legal, yeah, they should have the rights of a citizen because they are citizens. Right. If they're illegal, so it's about their status. If they're illegal, no, we shouldn't be granting them rights as citizens because that goes against our entire immigration system. At the same time, in order to do that well, you have to overhaul and better the immigration system. I've dealt with the immigration system just over the years with different folks and different things. And it's almost like a lottery. I mean, in fact, some of the things they do, they call them lotteries, but there's no consistent set of rules and regulations. It really almost depends on which immigration person you deal with as to what rule you get. And so I think we have to both be hardline and that we don't allow illegal immigration and we don't reward it. But on the other hand, we also have to reform our immigration system so that it actually makes sense and that people can have a clear process into our country that keeps our country safe and that at the same time maintains our value for multiculturalism, but also, I don't mean the way that sometimes other people do, but in the sense of multiple cultures feeding, while maintaining a common culture that is America.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as English being the official language, or, I think it pretty much is, but I just want to make sure that, again, we are not, part of conservative values is keeping the government out of people's lives. Okay, so then making legislation that says, okay, well, we're only going to make this English. Okay, I don't think that helps us. Just like if we were, even as a Christian, we decided that, way back the founders decided that we're not going to have an official religion. Okay, so, I believe in promoting English. I have very good friends who have come here from Mexico. They've done it legally. Their children don't even speak Spanish. Okay, because they want to assimilate. Okay, typically it's harder for the older generations to assimilate because they have been set in, speaking Spanish for 40, 50 years. So we'll see that. But then moving forward, I don't think that we should mandate that companies have a Spanish version or a German version or, all of these different versions of documents. If you want to be a United States citizen, I do believe that you should learn English and then that those documents should be at the behest of the company and not be forced. And then there was a second part to the question, or was there?
Well, that's basically okay. Stay up.
Oh yeah, no, but as far as constitutional rights, if they are legal immigrants, then absolutely. If they are illegal, no. I don't believe that we should be shutting down the government right now, as of last night, over DACA. So, if it comes down to that, then no. Okay.
Okay, your next point is, what do you feel is going to be the major thrust of your first 2 years in the House?
Okay, so relationship building. Okay, so coming in as a rookie, relationship building is going to be the biggest one. And I think that that's where maybe Jeremy and I might be different, is I read an article the other day by the Taylor Press that said our former representative has salted the earth for Jeremy. Okay?
What does that mean?
Nothing will grow. So, farmer talk. So, at the end of the day, people don't quite know how to take me. Okay? And sometimes that's good. Okay? Jeremy has a long storied history, pardon the pun. And so, are those bridges burnt? So my first part is relationship building. Okay? But that doesn't come at a sacrifice of me or my value or values. So relationship building will be the first thing. Primarily, I want to make sure that I'm on a committee that makes a difference. And if that's school finance reform, health and human services, heck, I'd go on the calendar committee if I could.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because that's who rules, right? The calendar committee. Yeah. So those are 3 big goals that I would like to do, or Homeland Security, or that would be goals of mine. But number one is relationship building, because if nobody is going to work with you, you're not going to get anything done, regardless if you're sitting in the seat or not.
Mr. Stork.
Top 3 goals, right? So on the relationship building thing, I already have a lot of relationships. I've developed them over the last year or so. God's just really given them to me and others with people at the state level, which is why we've got Strauss out. I've been working with our chairman, our party, was the state chaplain. There's a reason, because I have a relationship. Doesn't just point people who doesn't know. Other people in the House, the Freedom Caucus, and others, I have a relationship with. Many, not just the Freedom Caucus, but not because I'm an insider, because I'm not, but just because I do have friendships, because I have been a national leader for 20 years. Not because I'm some beholden insider, but because yeah, just I've done that for so long, and been I'm on the board of the National Day of Prayer. So I mean, you're pretty much, I've been sued by the Freedom for Religion Foundation, I don't know, more times than I can count. So those sorts of things, you kind of make relationships along the way. But I would say, in terms of my focus, property tax reform, school finance reform. We got to focus on that. We got to push for that. We got to make it happen. It's got to happen, I believe, in the same session, because they're so dovetailed together. In terms of just personal focuses, as a legislator, I believe religious liberty has got to be a key issue. And promoting religious liberty in the House and making sure that we allow for that sort of thing. Our current legislator, Larry, there was a lot of great legislation that he could have sponsored, and he didn't this session. And it never made it to the floor, right? And so we don't know how he would have voted on it, but we know that he didn't sponsor it. Well, I can tell you, it wouldn't have been me. I would have sponsored a lot of that stuff. Things that, like, one of the representatives protecting lawyers from their religious beliefs being discriminated when they were joining the bar. I would have been sponsoring that bill. Larry did not. There are various others I could go through with the foster care system and taking care of kids. There were some religious liberty protections there that I would have sponsored, and Larry did not. So these are things I would do. Religious liberty is a big deal to me. And then I will focus on legislative ethics reform. If no one else will write that bill for term limits, I will. If no one else will write that bill for a moratorium, I will. But I'd rather bring together friends and others that I will make friends with to help write those bills as a team.
Stand up. This is the last question, and it basically boils down to this. Do you believe it's proper for an incumbent to anoint a possible replacement?
Proper. Proper is an interesting word there. So, is it legal? Absolutely. I mean, he has free speech right. Larry Gonzalez, I'm just going to use the right name here, can get behind Cynthia Flores and throw half the money she raised in this last cycle came from Larry Gonzalez's campaign. Over half. So he is running through her right now. He's been running through her on Facebook. He's been running through her with all the leaders I talk to. They say, yeah, Larry's shopping around everywhere. He's running through her with money. Can he do that? Absolutely. It's his legal right. Should he do that? Probably not. Because it's not, we don't live in a place of kingships or like lineages and stuff like that. So, what bothers me about it isn't so much that he's doing it, it's the attitude in which he's doing it. It's sort of like, well, who are you to even get in the way, right? That is the problem I have. Not the fact that he's doing it. He has a free speech right to spend, as long as he doesn't violate campaign laws and things, he can do that. I'm not going to speak against that. But I will speak against just the attitude in which he's just basically, his opposition to me is basically like, what right do you have to even be here? Well, guess what? I'm a citizen in the district, and I'm running, right? And I also have a very strong track record of fighting for things and being successful at it. And that seems to bother him and others to the point that they're making up things that aren't true. Those sorts of behaviors is where I get into the should and oughts and proper. Not so much just should he be able to advocate for Cynthia. Yeah, I mean he can. But it is very clear that he is running through Cynthia and that she is supporting him. In fact, he came at our EC. So I'm talking to insiders here. We're all part, in that sense. He came to our EC and said, why hasn't people spoken to me about this race before they decided to run? Well, who do you think he was talking to? Me, right? Well, guess what? I took him at his word. And I was at a pro-life event. I walked up to him in a parking lot. I actually drove up to him. I had my wife in the car. I thought, he doesn't have a bunch of people around him. This would be a great opportunity to listen to whatever he has to say. So Larry, I'm not looking for your endorsement, but can I listen? I'll listen to anything you have to say. He said, no. He said, that time's up. And then I drove a little further because I was like, no, Larry, I want you to know, no tricks here. I'll listen. You know what he did? He started yelling and screaming at me. And then he said, I'm going to make your life hard for the next 6 months. That kind of behavior is improper. So that's where I use the word proper.
Mr. Ward.
Yep. So,
and before you start,
yes.
Remember that after this will be, you can do a 2-minute closing.
Yeah, that's fine. So, Davy Crockett is my spirit animal. I don't know if you know it. Davy Crockett, he came to Texas. He gave up his life for Texas. Okay, and so as a transplant from Florida, I really agree with a lot of his sayings. And one of his things was that he thought it very improper for an incumbent president to endorse his replacement. Because at that point, he felt like it was his to give. Mm-hmm. Didn't we just leave a situation like that when our founders came over? So, and this is the same instance, okay? The ego to think that he owns it to endorse and almost just pass the baton on to the next person, okay? So not on top, and not to begrudge the moment, but then she's also married to someone who was on the Round Rock City Council. So when you try to fight for your political subdivisions and the separation between state and what you're fighting for in the city, on the city level, how do we make sure that there's no coercion? To me, that's troublesome. Because then at that point, the city has the rule, not the state. And so I would like to see that actually change. And another reason why I'm running.
Excellent. So now you're going to come up with 2 minutes of your closing statement. And we must note that the duck hasn't said anything to rebut these two men. So let's pay attention to his closing statement, basically telling us why you should be the candidate we voted.
Right. So I think the biggest thing is going to be the Republican Party has a split. Okay, we've heard it today, right? So why is that? We have all gone our separate ways and said, you know what, I'm going to pick a side. We've seen it in the county commissioner's race. We're seeing it now in the representative's race. We're seeing it in the, pretty much all of them, the judge's race. Everybody's picking a side and going with that. You know, I'm not the smoothest, most polished person when it comes to politics. Okay, I wasn't groomed to do this. I wasn't raised to do this. But as a taxpayer and an ambassador for the Republican values, I chose to do this. Okay, so let me be that sandpaper that kind of smooths the edges a little bit. Okay, I really do want to make sure that our party within Williamson County heals. I've got a history of healing. I want to bring that back to Williamson County. Thank you.
Mr. Storr.
I'm the best candidate because I have the most proven record of standing up when it's necessary and building coalitions when it's also necessary. I have a successful record of doing that both here in our state, in our county, and across the nation. I've faced all kinds of pressures. Already been there, done that. And I've done it successfully both in my own business and I've done it here already in our EC. And I understand when it's important to stand up against someone if you need to for certain things and how to do it while acting proper and not making it personal, but then also when it's important to build bridges, because I've done that my whole life. And that's what I've done. Our organization, the one I lead across the nation, basically builds coalitions on campus after campus with very different people to accomplish a greater goal together. I understand how to do that, but I also understand that when there are times not to compromise, and that's what I've shown. I'm the only candidate that's empirically have shown that in this race, and I think that's what I will continue to do. I'm our chaplain of our party. I was the chaplain of the state party. I'd still be the chaplain of the state party. And in fact, what I did to heal wounds as the chaplain of the state party, just to show you what happens behind the scenes. And this is what I'll do in the State House too. I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to do any of this nonsense stuff. I was at the state party thing at the bequest of the chairman. Our own SREC rep, Mike McCloskey, was causing a crazy ruckus the first day of the SREC when I showed up as a chaplain. He was opposing our SREC our state chairman on about everything he could that first day. It was bitter. So I got up the next morning and I held a prayer service with all of our SREC reps across the state, as many as would come. A little over half came, and we prayed. And I preached on John 17 as the chaplain, which is Jesus talking about a message of unity to accomplish greater goal. And the next day, you know what the state chairman texted me the next day? He said, Jeremy, it was miraculous, the difference in day one and day two. That's the kind of leadership I'm going to bring. And I know when it's important to say, yeah, the SREC rep did that to us. And then he followed up by bad-mouthing me to such an extent that it caused problems for the whole party. They're willing to undercut our own county, who had someone who had the ear of the state, and still does, of the state chairman. so that they can accomplish their own little personal agendas. That is what I will stand up against. But on the other way, I know when to build coalitions for those that are willing to work together and not do like middle school politics here.
We thank you both. Thank you both.